Quick one. Last video hit over 100 comments, which is absolutely mind-blowing for this channel. Let's try that again for this video. Comment down what you think about these stories, or just a hello, and the team will reply. We always reply to the comments. As always, please like and subscribe and help this channel grow. Thank you. When I think back to my first encounters with Ricky Chase online, it's chilling to realize I was interacting with a predator right from the start. But at the time, his behavior seemed harmless, maybe just a bit odd. It began when I posted a casual selfie on Twitter one afternoon. I didn't think much of it, just a normal photo to share with friends and family. But to my surprise, Ricky left a comment saying how gorgeous I looked. His compliment seemed to come out of nowhere since we didn't know each other. I assumed he was just being sarcastic and joking around. But then he sent me a direct message apologizing if he had been offensive. He claimed he sincerely meant what he said about my appearance. Not wanting to make a big deal out of it, I told him not to worry. Looking back now, this was a huge red flag, but Ricky seemed polite enough at first, so we started chatting casually through DMs. He was actually quite funny and made me laugh with his quirky observations about life. Over the next couple weeks, our conversations grew longer. Ricky began opening up about deeply personal details. His struggles with depression, family issues, chronic loneliness. I started feeling uncomfortable with how much he shared, considering we were still practically strangers. But I chalked it up to him just being extra open about his feelings. The tone shifted dramatically around Valentine's Day when Ricky suddenly asked me to be his girlfriend. This came completely out of left field. We had only been chatting for a matter of weeks, mostly about superficial topics. I was so stunned I accidentally muttered "ook" rather than giving an outright no. Ricky took this as a yes and began gushing about how amazing our future would be together. How he couldn't wait until we lived together and got married. He even called me his goddess. I was horrified by Ricky's intensity and false assumptions. When I gently tried to explain that I wasn't interested in being his girlfriend, he became emotional. He said I was the only good thing in his life, the sole reason he hadn't killed himself. Ricky's apparent instability made me feel guilty about rejecting him, so I stayed silent rather than firmly shutting things down. This was an enormous mistake, but at the time I felt trapped into placating this volatile stranger. In the following weeks, Ricky's obsessive and controlling behaviors escalated rapidly. If I was chatting with friends and took too long to respond to his texts, he would have emotional outbursts. He accused me of not caring enough and giving him insufficient attention. One day he saw I was texting a male friend and flew into a jealous rage. Despite us never discussing exclusivity, Ricky viewed me as his possession. In his mind, I existed solely for his pleasure. Ricky constantly pushed for video chat sessions of a bad nature. He minded that this is what couples do, it would bring us closer together. No matter how many times I stated my discomfort, he refused to respect my boundaries. He treated me like an object that owed him emotional and physical labor. When I explained I lived with family members so could not engage in video chats, Ricky grew resentful and angry. The final straw came when I mentioned chatting online with a male friend named Jordy. Ricky completely lost it, calling me vulgar names and accusing me of cheating on him. In reality, Jordy and I had never met in person. We simply shared similar interests and hobbies. But in Ricky's warped mindset, I had betrayed him unforgivably. He declared our relationship over, called me a whore, and blocked me. As disturbing as this situation had become, I still cried tears of relief after Ricky cut off contact. His obsessive hold over me had grown increasingly damaging. I knew rationally that his accusations made no sense, but Ricky had a way of warming into my mind and making me doubt myself. I was thankful to be free of his twisted attempts to control me. In hindsight, I deeply regret not ending things after the first red flags appeared. But Ricky initially came across as quirky and sensitive, disguising his dark intentions. Only after spending more time interacting with him did his true predatory nature emerge. He viewed me as a prize to be won, not as a human being with free will. This painful experience taught me important lessons about online safety. I learned not to ignore my instincts. When someone seems odd or off, don't make excuses for them. Don't allow yourself to be guilt-tripped into unwanted relationships. Cut off contact at the first sign of emotionally abusive or controlling behavior. Predators like Ricky exploit kind-hearted people who give them the benefit of the doubt. In the aftermath, I became much more cautious about meeting men online. My self-confidence took a blow, and I found it hard to open up and trust new people. But I did not allow one unstable person's obsessive actions to close me off entirely. With time, therapy, and the support of loved ones, I regained my independence and belief in myself. While deeply scaring, my experience with Ricky's online deception did make me stronger. I trust my gut more about people's intentions. I quickly disengage from those who don't respect my boundaries or try to isolate me from loved ones. I prioritize my own needs and safety. By sharing my story, I hope others can learn from my mistakes. Always watch for red flags when getting to know someone online. Never ignore uncomfortable gut feelings about their behavior. You do not owe anyone your time or affection. You have every right to end a conversation or block a contact that raises alarms. Seek help if you feel trapped in an obsessive, one-sided relationship. And believe that there are kind people worthy of your trust. You just need to weed out the predators hiding behind charming facades. My run-in with Ricky was traumatic, but it taught me to value myself and stay vigilant against emotional manipulation. I was feeling optimistic about my date with Will that night. We had matched online a few weeks ago and had some pleasant conversations over messaging. He seemed charming in our chats, asking thoughtful questions about my job, family, and hobbies. He made me laugh with witty remarks and appeared genuinely interested when I opened up about past relationships. I felt comfortable opening up to him and looked forward to meeting in person. When Will suggested meeting up for dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown, I gladly accepted. I took time getting ready that evening, putting on a new black dress and heels, styling my hair just right. I felt excited for the night ahead as I drove to the restaurant. I arrived first and let the hostess know I was meeting someone. She led me to a table set for two with candles glowing in the center. I settled in, touched up my lipstick, and straightened the silverware while waiting eagerly for Will to arrive. After about 15 minutes, I glanced up to see Will entering the restaurant. He scanned the tables, caught my wave, and made his way over. I stood up to greet him, but was taken aback when he sat down without even shaking my hand or saying hello. As I retook my seat across from him, he kept his eyes glued to his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I tried striking up a conversation, asking how his week had gone and if the traffic was bad getting here. But his replies were terse one-word answers, his attention still consumed by his phone screen. An uncomfortable silence descended on our table. I gently reminded Will that I had arrived on time and wished he would put his phone away so we could get to know each other better. He let out an exaggerated sigh, making a big production of turning off his phone and stuffing it in his pocket. But when our waiter arrived for our drink order, Will's eyes were wandering, scanning the restaurant instead of looking at me or the menu. He craned his neck to get a view of other tables and ogled female patrons walking by in short dresses. I felt embarrassed by his obvious leering and called him out, asking if he could please focus on our date. He became defensive, claiming he was just people watching in a normal way, but I knew he was blatantly checking out other women right in front of me. The way he brushed off my concerns made me feel insignificant. Things only got worse from there. After we ordered appetizers, I tried sparking conversation by asking about his interests. He mentioned he recently adopted a puppy, so I opened up about my love of dogs. But instead of bonding over our shared appreciation for canines, we went on a long rant about how dogs are disgusting, dirty animals plagued by health problems who spread disease everywhere they go. He said only negligent owners allow pets indoors and claimed dogs should be eliminated entirely. I sat there horrified as he spent 10 minutes passionately explaining why dogs are a scourge on society. As a devoted dog owner myself with two adorable pups at home who I absolutely adore, his venomous diatribe was deeply upsetting. I politely explained that I disagreed and tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. This man, who so vehemently despised dogs, could clearly never fit into my life. By the time our food arrived, I had lost my appetite entirely and was desperately looking for any excuse to cut this date short. But the worst was still yet to come. When our waiter brought the check, Will patted his pockets and pants dramatically before claiming he must have left his wallet at home. He didn't even attempt to apologize or offer to pay me back later. I sat there incredulous as an awkward pause fell over the table. Trying to avoid causing a scene at the expensive restaurant, I reluctantly put down my credit card, chalking this up as an expensive life lesson. On our walk out to the parking lot afterwards, Will suddenly asked if we could stop at the corner store because he wanted a snack for the road home. Confused, I questioned how he planned to pay without his wallet. He then miraculously produced his wallet from his pocket, waving it tauntingly in my face. So he had blatantly lied just to force me to cover the pricey dinner bill. I was absolutely furious and lit into him about deceiving me just to get a free meal. He simply shrugged it off, stating he never pays for unsuccessful first dates, as if it were a perfectly normal policy. To add insult to injury, when Will emerged from the store minutes later munching on a candy bar, he had the audacity to ask me to pay for half of it. I angrily refused and told him there was no chance whatsoever of seeing him again after the atrocious way he acted all night. I felt shaken, used, and betrayed as I stormed off alone to my car, replaying the ridiculous sequence of events in disbelief. The entire drive home, I berated myself for not picking up on the red flags sooner. Will's rudeness when he arrived should have tipped me off. His distractedness and wandering eyes throughout dinner were also glaring signs he did not take our date seriously. Then not one but two instances of deception related to the bill confirmed this man completely lacked morals. I felt ashamed it took me so long to stand up for myself and escape the disastrous date. I vowed in the future to trust my instincts sooner when a man's actions don't align with his words. In the weeks after, I was hesitant to meet anyone new from dating apps, worried I would end up in another upsetting situation. But with time, I regained enough confidence to tentatively start swiping again. I matched with a nice man named Liam who actually listened attentively on our first date and insisted on paying to my relief. We've gone on 5 more dates since, and he is consistently kind and considerate. My faith has been restored that chivalrous, honest men truly do exist out there, the total opposite of Will. While the experience with Will left me feeling used and foolish temporarily, in the long run it taught me invaluable lessons. I will never again ignore red flags or give dishonest, inconsiderate men more chances than they deserve. My standards are much higher after surviving that debacle, and I refuse to waste any more time on deceitful misogynists. I stand up for myself sooner at the first sign of disrespect. Although that awful date stung and left scars, it inspired personal growth I'm grateful for today. I emerged wiser and empowered, better able to spot narcissists and steer clear of them. The takeaway is that even truly horrible experiences can strengthen your resolve if you don't allow them to dampen your spirit. My confidence took a temporary bruising, but bouncing back wiser and stronger made me a better judge of character. I now trust my gut instincts sooner when a man's actions seem suspicious or dishonest. While Will briefly left me feeling foolish, I use it as motivation to demand better for myself. It was a Friday evening when I met up with Jake for our first date. We had matched on a dating app a few weeks prior and had been chatting nonstop ever since. He seemed so engaging over text, making me laugh with his quick wit and flirtatious banter. I felt an instant connection forming, even though we hadn't met in person yet. When Jake asked me out, I eagerly said yes. We made plans to meet at a trendy new restaurant downtown that came highly recommended. I took time getting ready that evening, carefully choosing a flattering black dress and heels, styling my hair just right. I wanted to look perfect for our first meeting. I sprayed on my favorite perfume, giving myself one last glance in the mirror before heading out, filled with excited anticipation for the night ahead. Arriving at the restaurant, I gave Jake's name to the hostess who led me to a small two-top table near the back. He hadn't arrived yet, so I ordered a glass of wine to calm my nerves. About 10 minutes passed before I saw Jake walk in looking just as handsome as his photos. Tall and athletic with piercing blue eyes and a warm smile that made my heart flutter. He spotted me instantly, his grin growing wider as he made his way over. The conversation flowed effortlessly once we began talking in person. We discovered shared interests in indie films, hiking, and foreign travel. I found him so easy to talk to, like chatting with an old friend. The laughs and flirty glances kept coming as the meal went on. Everything just felt so natural and fun with Jake. Afterward, we decided to extend the date by going for drinks at a lively bar down the street. The alcohol continued flowing freely, and Jake kept finding little ways to touch my hand or graze my leg. At first, I reveled in the physical contact, taken by how attracted we were to each other. But as more drinks went down, Jake started to get louder and more boisterous. His speech became increasingly slurred, his bright eyes now looking glassy and unfocused. The charm he displayed earlier was quickly dissolving into drunken messiness. Eventually, Jake excused himself to the men's room. When he came back, his demeanor had completely shifted. Once lively and engaged, he now seemed sullen and withdrawn. I gently asked if he was okay, but he brushed me off, claiming everything was fine. But over the next few minutes, his mood only darkened further. He slumped down, resting his head in his hands, mumbling incoherently under his breath. I strained to make out what he was saying. The only word I could clearly hear was a name, Nina. I sat puzzled, unsure of who he was talking about. But soon it became clear as Jake lamented how much he missed this Nina, his ex-girlfriend. How he'd made a huge mistake cheating on her and losing the best thing that ever happened to him. He went on, pouring his heart out about this woman, still utterly in love with her. I froze, stunned by this sudden oversharing about his ex on our first date. I tried to change the subject to anything else, but it was no use. The alcohol had set Jake's innermost thoughts and feelings loose. In his drunken state, he confessed that his motivation for asking me out was just to make Nina jealous. To try and rub in her face that he was out with someone new and doing just fine without her. Turns out he had specifically chosen this trendy restaurant because Nina worked here. He was hoping to run into her, to paraded me in front of her as his hot new date. I sat there horrified, realizing I was merely a pawn in Jake's ongoing obsession with his ex. The flirtation, alas, it had all been an act. A show put on by a desperate, lovesick man who saw me as nothing more than a tool to manipulate his former girlfriend. I felt foolish sitting there in the dress I had excitedly picked out for the occasion. The night I had looked forward to so eagerly came crashing down around me. I wanted nothing more than to get as far away from Jake as possible, but given his sloppy, drunken state, I knew I couldn't just abandon him there at the bar. So reluctantly, I paid our bill and half-carried Jake out to his truck. The drive to his apartment was painfully quiet, interrupted only by the occasional mumbled Nina. When we arrived, I walked into his door to make sure he got inside okay before proceeding to walk the 45 minutes back home alone in the dark. Exhausted, I finally crawled into bed after midnight replaying the events of the disastrous evening. I was upset at the way Jake had used me, but more so at myself for being so foolish. I had ignored subtle red flags because of the superficial attraction. I resolved to be much more discerning moving forward, to take things slowly and watch for genuine connection, not charm and flattery. The next morning, I immediately deleted Jake's number in our dating app history. I knew I deserved someone who saw how special I was, not just a placeholder or a pawn. When I was ready, I would try dating again, but with a renewed sense of self-worth. I refused to dim my light for someone else's validation. For now, I needed time to heal, regain my confidence, and learn from this experience. Though the first date was an utter catastrophe, at least Jake's true manipulative colors came through early on before I got in any deeper. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? I decided not to let this knock me down for long. My time would come with someone worthy soon enough. This was just a painful blip, not the end. Still plenty of road left ahead on the journey to find love. Chin up, eyes open. I got this. I was feeling optimistic when I matched with Kenny on Swipe Right. His dating profile picture showed a tall, rugged guy with a kind smile that caught my eye. In our messages, he came across as intellectual and adventurous. Kenny mentioned he was fluent in Russian, had been selected for jury duty, and even corrected the presiding judge on a legal matter during the trial. I was thoroughly impressed. We had plans to meet for dinner at a trendy new restaurant downtown that I had been wanting to try. The day of our date, I took extra care getting ready, putting on a new dress and styling my hair. I did my makeup just so and spritz on my favorite perfume. I wanted to look and feel my best. I arrived right on time and let the hostess know I was meeting someone. She led me to the bar area to wait. I ordered a glass of wine and tried to calm my nerves. I was excited but a little anxious too, since this was my first date after being single for several months. I waited patiently at the bar for 15 minutes, then 30. An hour passed and I started to worry that I had been stood up. Just as I was about to give up hope and leave, Kenny came rushing in, flustered and out of breath. He apologized for being so late, saying he underestimated how long it would take to get to the restaurant from work. I took in his appearance. He was decent looking, though not quite as tall as I imagined from his photos. I let it slide since he seemed sincerely apologetic. The hostess seated us at a lovely table at a window. I was ready to move past the awkward start to the evening. But as soon as we began talking, Kenny launched into boastful stories about himself. He went on and on about his Russian language skills, his vast knowledge of the legal system, and how the judge had thanked him for catching a mistake during jury duty. He then name-dropped various celebrities and public figures he supposedly knew well. I tried to interject a few times to change the subject, but he kept steering it back to himself. When our food arrived, I hoped Kenny would pause his bragging long enough for us to eat, but he continued dominating the conversation between bites. Whenever I tried telling a story, he would interrupt and make it about himself again. I started to realize this date was becoming a disaster, but I did my best to keep an open mind. About halfway through the meal, Kenny excused himself to use the restroom. I quietly ate and responded to a few texts on my phone, relieved to have a break from his nonstop boasting. But 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. By 20 minutes, I was concerned. I waved over our server and discreetly asked if she would please check on my date. She headed to the back with a knowing look. After 30 minutes had gone by, I was utterly mortified. A small group of the restaurant staff approached my table to check in. They asked gently if this was a blind date gone wrong or some kind of dare. I could feel my face flush red with embarrassment. Sensing my extreme discomfort, they quickly offered to cover my meal so I could leave right away without a fuss. I thanked them profusely for their understanding. I decided to just call an Uber rather than wait around any longer for Kenny to return. Clearly, this date was an unmitigated disaster. There was no reason to drag it out. As I waited curbside for my ride, a few of the kind restaurant employees came outside to keep me company. They wanted to make sure I got into the Uber safely before heading back inside. I was very touched by their consideration. On the ride home, I replayed the awful date in my mind. How could I have misjudged Kenny so completely based on our online interactions? I was frustrated with myself for wasting an evening on someone who turned out to be so self-absorbed. I decided then and there to take a lengthy break from dating apps. This experience had left me disenchanted with online dating. When I arrived home, I immediately unmatched and deleted Kenny on Swipe Right. I wanted no chance of him contacting me again. But somehow he managed to find my phone number and proceeded to bombard me with calls and texts for days afterward. I eventually had to block his number completely to get him to stop pursuing me. This was absolutely the worst first date I've ever been on. I was stood up for over an hour. Then I was subjected to nonstop bragging and condescension once Kenny finally arrived. And to top it off, he abandoned me mid-meal for 30+ minutes without explanation. The only positive was the restaurant staff who recognized my predicament and helped me exit the situation quickly and easily. After reflecting on this disaster date, I realized I need to listen to my instincts more closely. I should not take online dating profiles at face value or make excuses for unacceptable behavior. I was so excited when I matched with him on Hinge. We really hit it off right away, bonding over our love of the same obscure indie bands and swapping playlists of our favorite songs. After chatting nonstop for a week, he finally asked me out on a real date. He took me to this cool little restaurant I'd never heard of before called Blue Figure. It had string lights hanging from the patio and live music, giving it a really intimate vibe. Over dinner, we discovered we both spent summers during college house painting to make money, and bonded over swapping stories about some of the nightmare clients we'd had. I could tell he was trying to impress me by picking this unique spot for our first date, and I was definitely impressed by what a gentleman he was. When he walked me to my car after, he just gave me a quick kiss goodnight. He didn't try to invite himself over or take things too far physically, which told me he was interested in more than just a casual hookup. Our next 2 dates were dinner and a movie, and then an outdoor concert in the park. Both were just as great as the first. I found myself really starting to fall for him. We had so many inside jokes already and could talk for hours without running out of things to say. After that third date at the concert, I ended up going back to his place and sleeping with him. In the moment, it felt right to take that next step physically. Soon after, I had to go out of town for a big conference for work. It was my first business trip with this new job, and I was really stressed about giving my presentation. So I was pretty distracted the whole time, and we didn't really stay in contact much while I was gone. But I figured we were still on the same page about wanting to see where this was going. When I got back from my work trip, I texted him right away and was excited to hear back from him immediately. He asked how my conference went, and then immediately followed up by asking if I wanted to go with him to the Lakeside Music Festival that weekend. One of our favorite indie artists, The Head and the Heart, was one of the headliners. The festival was 5 hours away in a town called Lakeside that I'd never been to, but I spontaneously said yes without thinking too much about the logistics. I was just really touched that he wanted to take me to see one of my favorite bands. At the time, it felt like a romantic adventure. On the drive there, I noticed he seemed a little off. He was texting a lot and seemed distracted. I brushed it aside, telling myself I was overthinking things. At the festival, we wandered around checking out all the different bands and food tents. He seemed to be having a good time, but still seemed distant somehow compared to our earlier dates. When we first walked in, he didn't reach for my hand like he normally would. Again, I tried not to let it bother me too much and told myself I was being paranoid. About an hour before the head and the heart was set to come on stage, I was feeling excited for their set and a little tipsy. Feeling romantic, I leaned in to give him a kiss, but he stopped me, looked right in my eyes, and told me he had actually met someone else while I was gone on my work trip. He said he didn't think we should keep seeing each other anymore. I was completely blindsided and instantly heartbroken. I felt like an idiot for not picking up on the signs earlier that something was off. When I asked why he hadn't just told me this before asking me to come to this festival so far from home, he casually admitted he just didn't have anyone else to go with and didn't want to come alone. I was in total shock and furious. I had really trusted him and thought our connection was meaningful. Now I realized I was just a placeholder to him, a convenient distraction until he met someone new. He was perfectly nice and gentlemanly on the surface, but clearly didn't truly care about me or consider my feelings at all. If he did, there's no way he would let me drive 5 hours just to break my heart as soon as we got there. I felt so foolish for falling for his charming act and believing he was as into this as I was. The fantasy I built up in my head of us came crashing down in an instant. The rest of the festival was completely ruined, and all I wanted was to go home. But I was stranded there with him for the whole night since we had driven together. I had to sleep in the same tent with him, pretending I was fine when I was completely falling apart inside. I felt trapped. As soon as we got back, I blocked his number and unfollowed him on everything, wanting no chance of contact. My friends kept telling me I had dodged a bullet, and it was good I found out what he was really like sooner rather than later if he was going to be that heartless. Logically, I knew they were probably right, but my bruised ego and broken heart didn't heal overnight. I was so angry at him for using me, but even more angry at myself for being so stupid. I had let my guard down too quickly because I was so excited about our connection and really wanted to believe I had finally met a great guy after so many dozen situations that went nowhere. After that experience, I was really hesitant to put myself back out there and open myself up to someone new. But with time and long talks with friends, the sting started to fade and I regained my confidence. I decided I wouldn't let one bad experience stop me from being open to love. Heartbreak is just part of the process sometimes. Now I know some of the red flags to look out for and to take things very slow in the initial phases. I trust myself more now to recognize the difference between a real substantial connection versus someone just putting on an act or mirroring what I want to hear. I'm still a hopeless romantic at heart, but with a healthier dose of caution and discernment now when meeting someone new. What happened sucked and was really painful, but in a strange way it taught me a lot about myself and relationships. I emerged feeling wiser and stronger on the other side. I'm proud of myself for not becoming bitter or jaded, and for still believing there is someone great out there who will truly value and respect me. When I do finally meet the right person, I think having gone through that hardship will make it feel even more special and worth the wait. For now, I'm content being on my own, focusing on my friends and career, and not rushing into anything new. I'm trying to just have fun meeting new people without getting prematurely attached. My dating app days definitely aren't over necessarily, but a lot more selective now about who I let into my heart. I think that discernment will serve me well, and I'm hopeful that the next time I start to fall for someone, it will be for real. I still can't believe how that date went. I mean, I've had some bad Tinder meetups before, but this one with Bella really took the cake. We had matched online a few days before, and her profile seemed nice enough. Cute pixie cut blonde hair, bright smile, said she liked hiking and yoga. Her bio was pretty sparse, but I didn't think much of it at the time. We exchanged some messages about work, hobbies, the usual stuff you chat about on dating apps. When I asked her out to dinner, she suggested this fancy French place downtown called Bistro du Jour. I thought it was a little pricey for a first date, but she insisted it had the best coq au vin in the city, so I agreed, thinking she just had expensive taste. Boy, was I wrong. From the moment we sat down at the white linen top table, Bella started grilling me about my job, how much I make, what I drive, where I live, all super personal questions you normally wouldn't dive into on a first date. I tried to politely dodge them by asking her about her hobbies or pets like her profile mentioned, but she always steered the conversation back to my career and finances. She'd say things like, "Oh, you went to Europe last summer. You must make good money to afford trips like that." I mentioned I got a great deal on a cheap flight and stayed in hostels, but she brushed right past it. When our server brought the bread basket, she point blank asked me, "So, how much do you make a year?" I was so caught off guard I nearly choked on my roll. I tried to avoid answering at first, saying my income wasn't really appropriate first date material, but Bella wouldn't let it go. She kept badgering me, her voice taking on a pushy, entitled tone as she said she just wanted to make sure I could provide and wasn't some broke loser living with his parents. By the time our entrees arrived and she was still harping on money, I was getting really uncomfortable. But I also didn't want to just bail and make things painfully awkward, so I stuck it out in hopes the rest of dinner would be less invasive. Finally, after the third time she demanded to know my salary, I caved and told her just to shut her up. As soon as the words left my mouth, her expression shifted to disgust. "You, that's it," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I thought a guy your age would be making at least 6 figures. Don't you have any career ambition, or are you just an average wage slave?" At this point, I was completely stunned. We hadn't even known each other an hour, and she was already judging my entire value as a human being by my bank account balance. This was not the sweet, outdoorsy girl I thought I had matched with online. The waiter swung by to check on us, and I could tell from his expression he had overheard Bella's rude comments. She didn't even seem embarrassed, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. When the check came, I threw down my card as fast as I could, not even trying to fight her for it. I just wanted this nightmare first date to end. But Bella wasn't done. As we stood up to leave, she noticed my unfinished plate of steak frites and scrunched her nose. "Well, if you can't afford to take a girl to nice places like this, I'll take that home for lunch tomorrow. I hate to see good food go to waste." And with that, she grabbed my leftover plate and stuffed it into her oversized designer handbag without an ounce of shame. I was so shocked I didn't even try to stop her. We walked up to the curb in painfully awkward silence. She immediately called an Uber and left without even a goodbye, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, absolutely dumbfounded that person could be so rude and entitled. After the initial shock wore off, I was fuming. How dare she judge my entire worth based solely on my income, and then steal food I had paid for right off my plate? I'm a hardworking, decent guy, and I deserved way better than that dismissive, insulting treatment from her. I got home and immediately deleted my Tinder account. Bella had wasted my time and money on the most cringeworthy first date ever, but she also taught me a valuable lesson. I need to trust my gut and watch for red flags early on so this never happens again. I'd so much rather be single than deal with another greedy, superficial person like her. When I do start dating again, I'll remember this awful experience and make sure any potential partners actually share my values. No more spoiled, self-obsessed girls who equate a man's self-worth with his net worth. Bella may have temporarily killed my desire to date, but interacting with her gave me clarity. There are kind, caring women out there looking for true connection, not just dollar signs. I'm going to hold my standards high and wait for someone who loves me for me, not my bank account. This was just one bad egg in the bunch. My real match is still out there, and next time I'll be a better judge of character when those red flags appear. I still can't believe how that date went. I mean, I've had some bad Tinder meetups before, but this one with Bella really took the cake. We had matched online a few days before, and her profile seemed nice enough. Cute pixie cut blonde hair, bright smile, said she liked hiking and yoga. Her bio was pretty sparse, but I didn't think much of it at the time. We exchanged some messages about work, hobbies, the usual stuff you chat about on dating apps. When I asked her out to dinner, she suggested this fancy French place downtown called Bistro du Jour. I thought it was a little pricey for a first date, but she insisted it had the best coq au vin in the city, so I agreed, thinking she just had expensive taste. Boy, was I wrong. From the moment we sat down at the white linen top table, Bella started grilling me about my job, how much I make, what I drive, where I live, all super personal questions you normally wouldn't dive into on a first date. I tried to politely dodge them by asking her about her hobbies or pets like her profile mentioned, but she always steered the conversation back to my career and finances. She'd say things like, "Oh, you went to Europe last summer. You must make good money to afford trips like that." I mentioned I got a great deal on a cheap flight and stayed in hostels, but she brushed right past it. When our server brought the bread basket, she point blank asked me, "So, how much do you make a year?" I was so caught off guard I nearly choked on my roll. I tried to avoid answering at first, saying my income wasn't really appropriate first date material, but Bella wouldn't let it go. She kept badgering me, her voice taking on a pushy, entitled tone as she said she just wanted to make sure I could provide and wasn't some broke loser living with his parents. By the time our entrees arrived and she was still harping on money, I was getting really uncomfortable. But I also didn't want to just bail and make things painfully awkward, so I stuck it out in hopes the rest of dinner would be less invasive. Finally, after the third time she demanded to know my salary, I caved and told her just to shut her up. As soon as the words left my mouth, her expression shifted to disgust. "You, that's it," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I thought a guy your age would be making at least 6 figures. Don't you have any career ambition, or are you just an average wage slave?" At this point, I was completely stunned. We hadn't even known each other an hour, and she was already judging my entire value as a human being by my bank account balance. This was not the sweet, outdoorsy girl I thought I had matched with online. The waiter swung by to check on us, and I could tell from his expression he had overheard Bella's rude comments. She didn't even seem embarrassed, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. When the check came, I threw down my card as fast as I could, not even trying to fight her for it. I just wanted this nightmare first date to end. But Bella wasn't done. As we stood up to leave, she noticed my unfinished plate of steak frites and scrunched her nose. "Well, if you can't afford to take a girl to nice places like this, I'll take that home for lunch tomorrow. I hate to see good food go to waste." And with that, she grabbed my leftover plate and stuffed it into her oversized designer handbag without an ounce of shame. I was so shocked I didn't even try to stop her. We walked up to the curb in painfully awkward silence. She immediately called an Uber and left without even a goodbye, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, absolutely dumbfounded that person could be so rude and entitled. After the initial shock wore off, I was fuming. How dare she judge my entire worth based solely on my income, and then steal food I had paid for right off my plate? I'm a hardworking, decent guy, and I deserved way better than that dismissive, insulting treatment from her. I got home and immediately deleted my Tinder account. Bella had wasted my time and money on the most cringeworthy first date ever, but she also taught me a valuable lesson. I need to trust my gut and watch for red flags early on so this never happens again. I'd so much rather be single than deal with another greedy, superficial person like her. When I do start dating again, I'll remember this awful experience and make sure any potential partners actually share my values. No more spoiled, self-obsessed girls who equate a man's self-worth with his net worth. Bella may have temporarily killed my desire to date, but interacting with her gave me clarity. There are kind, caring women out there looking for true connection, not just dollar signs. I'm going to hold my standards high and wait for someone who loves me for me, not my bank account. This was just one bad egg in the bunch. My real match is still out there, and next time I'll be a better judge of character when those red flags appear. I still remember the day I downloaded that dating app back in 2014. I was fresh out of college and new to the city, and figured it couldn't hurt to try meeting someone online. After mindlessly swiping through profiles for a while, I decided to take a break. Later that night, though, I logged back on, and Ariana's profile immediately caught my eye. She had these piercing blue eyes and a warm smile that just seemed so genuine. I read through her bio and saw we had a lot of similar interests. So I took a chance and sent her a message seeing if she'd want to meet up for coffee sometime. I was pretty doubtful she'd even respond, but miraculously the next morning I had a notification from her saying she'd love to meet up. We exchanged a few more messages over the next week to nail down the specifics. I suggested a cafe near my apartment in the city since I didn't have a car at the time. The day our date, I probably changed my outfit 5 times and checked my hair in the mirror repeatedly. I don't know why I was so nervous, because Ariana put me completely at ease as soon as I walked in and saw her sitting there. She gave me a little wave, and I noticed she was even prettier in person. I sat down across from her, and conversation came so naturally right from the start. We realized we both loved traveling and had done semesters abroad in Europe during college. She told me all about her close-knit family back home, while I described growing up in the suburbs with my single mom. 3 hours slipped by in what felt like no time at all. When we finally decided to leave, Ariana suggested exchanging numbers and meeting up again soon. I tried to play it cool, but inside I was thrilled. Over the next few months, Ariana and I steadily grew closer. We would meet up several times a week, alternating planning fun date ideas like going to museums and concerts downtown or just staying in to cook dinner together. 6 months after that fateful first date, we decided to officially become a couple. Up until meeting Ariana, I had never really experienced that kind of effortless connection with someone. We came from pretty different backgrounds, but just clicked so well emotionally. The next few years were filled with all sorts of relationship milestones. We took weekend trips to quaint towns outside the city, where we'd explore little shops and eat at cute local restaurants. During the holidays, I finally worked up the nerve to meet her family. I was worried they might think I wasn't good enough for their daughter, but they welcomed me with open arms right away. Ariana met my mom too, who absolutely adored her warm personality. Things got really serious between us when I asked Ariana to come as my date to my sister's wedding out of state. She happily agreed and charmed my whole extended family that weekend. By year 5, we were essentially living together and talking about our future in a more permanent sense. I knew without a doubt by then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Ariana. We applied to get an apartment through the government housing program, hoping to finally get a place of our own. Unfortunately, our application ended up being rejected. I started saving up to buy her a ring, hoping I could propose as soon as I had enough money. Looking back now, I think our problem started around year 6 of the relationship. I was letting little things get to me more easily, like becoming irrationally jealous if I saw Ariana chatting with other guys. Instead of communicating openly when something bothered me, I would just bottle up my irritation until finally exploding in anger. Ariana tried to be patient, understanding, but eventually got fed up with constantly walking on eggshells around my temper. One night, after a stupid argument, Ariana finally opened up about how she had been feeling. She said for a few months now she had started developing feelings for a coworker, but she still cared about me deeply and wanted to try to work things out between us if we could improve our communication. I was completely blindsided and furious when I heard her confess this. I gave her an ultimatum that she needed to cut things off with this other guy immediately if she wanted to stay together. Of course, reacting like that only pushed her farther away. About a week later, Ariana came to my apartment and made it clear things were over between us for good. As upset as I was, deep down I knew a breakup had been a long time coming, considering the way our relationship issues had developed. We had grown into very different people from when we first met. After Ariana moved out her last things, I completely fell apart emotionally. I started drinking heavily and just wallowing in self-pity. In my darkest moments in the months following, I even contemplated ending my pain permanently. One morning I woke up with a splitting hangover and suddenly realized I owed it to myself and my family who loved me to try and turn my life around again. It's been a couple years now since that difficult breakup. I still have fond memories of my time with Ariana, though in hindsight we clearly wanted different things. These days, I'm focusing my energy on self-improvement. I picked up some new hobbies I'd always been interested in but never had time for, like photography and woodworking. I reconnected with old friends from college who I had fallen out of touch with when I was with Ariana. I also got really serious about paying down debts and saving money. While I'm not quite ready for another relationship yet, I can feel myself slowly healing and gaining some perspective. My online dating days are behind me for good, but I truly believe this next phase of life has so much in store for me. It was just another Saturday night when I decided to open up Bumble and see if there were any interesting guys around. I hadn't had much luck on dating apps before, but figured it couldn't hurt to swipe and chat a bit. After about 15 minutes of aimless swiping, a guy named Ethan popped up. He was cute, tall, fit, with bright blue eyes and dimples. We instantly matched and started chatting. The conversation was going well at first. We discovered we both loved hiking and had the same taste in movies. He seemed totally normal, asking me friendly questions about my job as a graphic designer and my life in the city. I told him about my recent move to the area after getting a new position at an advertising firm. He said he was also somewhat new, having taken a job as a software engineer after finishing grad school last year. We really clicked talking about adjusting to a new city and figuring out the best hole-in-the-wall restaurants. His questions felt casual and harmless, like how many siblings I had or my favorite way to spend a Saturday. After about an hour of upbeat, flowing banter, he brought up meeting up that weekend. I hesitated for a minute, since meeting strangers from the internet can be risky, but he seemed nice enough. We were both professionals with a lot in common. Plus, we had really hit it off over chat. So I said yes to meeting that Saturday afternoon for coffee. The next day at work, things started getting a little weird. Out of the blue during our lunchtime chat, Ethan asked me to send him a photo without makeup on. I thought this was an odd request for a guy I hadn't even met yet, and politely declined. But he pushed back, saying he wanted to see the real me before our date. I tried to make light of it and sent him a silly selfie with my hair in a bun and no visible makeup, hoping that would satisfy him. Still, the entitled attitude was rubbing me the wrong way. Over the next couple days leading up to Saturday, Ethan made several other tone-deaf comments over text.
Thanks
He
for
kept
listening
calling
in.
himself one of
If
the
you
nice
like these
guys
stories and
lamenting
want
how
to
he
hear
kept getting
more,
stuck in the
then
friend zone
please
with women.
subscribe and
Having heard
like
these terms
and
before
support
from
this new
insecure
channel.
men online,
We have more
they were
stories
instant
for
red
you to
flags
listen
for me.
to.
The more we spoke, the more it became clear Ethan felt of attention from women. My guard was officially up, but our date was already set. Our conversations got more strained as Saturday grew closer. One day he asked me prying questions about past relationships and family issues I wasn't ready to discuss with a stranger. When I politely told him I preferred not to get into all that yet, he got defensive. Another time he grew angry and accusatory when I didn't respond to his messages for a few hours while I was in back-to-back meetings at work. By Wednesday night, I had enough of his entitled attitude and games and stopped answering his messages altogether. I hoped he would take the hint and move on. Unfortunately, that was not the case. On Friday evening, things took a dark turn. Out of the blue, abusive messages from Ethan started flooding my inbox on every social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. He had somehow found all my personal accounts and was livid, calling me horrible names for ghosting him after our great conversations. I was terrified by the unhinged vitriol coming from this complete stranger. How did he even find my private Facebook profile without barely any mutual connections? His cyberstalking abilities were alarming. I immediately blocked Ethan on all channels, but the damage was done. I felt violated knowing he could access my personal information so easily. I kept looking over my shoulder that whole weekend, worried he might show up in person and confront me. The dating app supposed to connect me with a potential partner had opened the door for a dangerous, obsessive man instead. In the years since, I've steered clear of online dating completely. The risks and unpredictable people you encounter just aren't worth it. I did see Ethan pop up on Bumble again a while back under a slightly different name, which sent a chill down my spine. I promptly reported his new profile, but the app didn't remove him. So he's likely still out there, luring other women with promises of being a nice guy, just like he did to me. I worry about his future targets and urge them to watch for red flags if they match with him. Stay safe, ladies. Dating apps may seem harmless, but you really don't know someone until you meet them in person. And sometimes, in just a few casual conversations, is enough for unstable people to become unhealthily attached and lash out. Don't ignore subtle warning signs or feel pressured to share personal details early on. Listen to your instincts if a match seems controlling or makes inappropriate remarks. Be prepared to block someone immediately at the first sign of trouble. Your safety comes first. My experience is a cautionary tale of how wrong virtual companionship can go in the hands of the wrong match. I learned this lesson the hard way, but hope others can avoid the same fate. With vigilance and caution, online dating can lead to meaningful connections. But in the wrong circumstances with the wrong person, it can spiral out of control and expose you to harassment or worse. A creepy encounter taught me to keep my guard up in the virtual dating world where everything is not always as it seems. Stay safe out there and trust your gut when chatting with strangers online. You never know someone's true colors until meeting in person.